All right, welcome everybody to Dharma Punk Seattle. It's good to see you all. Felt really nice it's been a busy day for me, so it felt really nice just to have that bell ring and to settle into this moment and breathe after a very, very busy day. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being here. The topic today is compassion. The Pali term for compassion is karuna, for those of you nerds who want to know that kind of stuff. And we've been plugging away at going through the divine abodes, the Brahma Viharas. Another translation or iteration that comes from Ajahn Sumedho for the Brahma Viharas is mature emotions. And I like that because it feels more resonant to my Western science-y brain, where so much of spirituality has become therapy speak. So being able to look at the Brahma Viharas as mature emotions is something that feels resonant with me. And like most of the Brahma Viharas, compassion, similar to loving kindness, similar to sympathetic joy, similar to equanimity, difficult to achieve in the way that it's described in Buddhism. Many people, I believe, want to count themselves as compassionate. And the way that it is talked about in Western culture is something that you can be fatigued in. I'm sure many people have heard that term used in work or especially in fields of hospitality, that compassion fatigue, that you can become so saturated with others' suffering that you just can't get anymore. And the type of compassion that is spoken about in Buddhism is not susceptible to that. And why is that? The type of compassion that is capable of breaking somebody down is one where we have sympathetic grief, where we become so sympathetic of others' suffering that we suffer too. That's not to say that in helping professions or just helping friends or helping people out in the world, we can't feel some level of depletion. The idea of a very exalted type of compassion is one that is imbued with wisdom and has a deep sense of understanding suffering and is meant to just be the response to all suffering. Compassion being an umbrella term for loving kindness, for equanimity, for forgiveness, for mercy, whatever it is, that any pain is to be met with compassion, or it can turn to suffering. And it works the opposite, that if we are suffering, we can reverse engineer with compassion to get to just the core pain. So it works in both directions. And so further, if somebody was practicing compassion in that way, there would be nothing to be fatigued by. You would not suffer. So something to think about and something to consider. In my own personal practice, compassion was something that felt really easy for me in the beginning. it felt, because of my personal way of approaching the world, wanting to do good on some level, and above all, really having people pleaser type tendencies, this almost solidified my people pleasing practices. This gave me an excuse to be the most people pleasing of all, because I didn't have wisdom balanced with this compassion. It was something that I felt very easily to understand where people come from, why people act the way that they do. It was easy for me to access that, but it was less easy for me to see the way that just following that thread could lead me to suffering. One of the suttas that comes up around the name of it, I think it's the Siddhaka Sutta, and it's one of my favorite suttas because it involves a pole dancer. There's a bamboo artist, that's what they called it back in the day, a bamboo artist. And her manager or her partner or whatever would hold the bamboo stick, and she would climb up the pole, do the tricks, and that was the thing. And so they were about to enter a competition, and the manager said, "Okay, you look after me, and I'll look after you. And then, we'll win the competition, we'll win the reward, we'll do good." And she says, "No, that wouldn't work. Like, I'll look after me, you look after you. And then we'll, win the reward, we'll do what we have to do." And so this is a story that the Buddha is telling. And he takes it further and says, the dancer was the one that was correct, and that when we look after ourselves, we're looking after others. And there's such, I think, those of us who have maybe a social justice, a helping sort of heart, there's such a desire to want to change the world. And one of the ways that a true form of compassion is talked about is that it starts with us. And that in order for us to change the world around us, we have to first look after ourselves. You can only imagine in this scenario where the guy is holding the bamboo stick, and the girl is doing tricks on the bamboo, and they're both looking at each other rather than looking out for their own safety, right? Like, that makes no sense, because you're more likely to screw up if you're looking elsewhere. So compassion is a really tricky one. It's difficult because it's more than just being good to others and good to ourselves. It requires a level of wisdom and ferocity, being able to be firm with our boundaries and the people around us. So, with that, we'll break for the discussion period. And I don't really have a strong question today. I think I'll just kind of keep it basic and inquire how how you're doing with your compassion practice. Where is it at? Where could parts of your life use a little bit more compassion? And then if you're tuning into the live stream, meditating or journaling on the topic. So, all right, go ahead and find your groups. All right, coming back, settling in, getting ready, comfortable to meditate. Finding a comfortable way to sit that is upright. Taking a long exhale, letting those shoulders drop away from your head. Scanning the face for any tension in the jaw, in the eyes or the tongue. And taking one more longer exhale and softening the belly. Connecting with the breath. And bringing to mind simultaneously some of your initial inspirations for practice. Recollecting the first time you heard the Dharma, or something else that inspired you to move along this path. That moment when something clicked and you knew. And trying to keep some steady attention on that thought and that feeling as you notice the breath rising and falling in the belly or the chest. Using the momentum of that inspiration to focus more deeply on the breath. It's easier to let our mind wander when we forget why we started, and what this is all for. Wherever you're focused in on the breath, whether it's the belly or the chest or the nose, connecting both points, nose and belly. Feeling the breath rise, the body through the inhale, and deflate the body through the exhale. The whole body breathing. And allow for some level of curiosity. How does your teeth feel when you breathe? Be willing to explore. Inquire. Without getting too lost in stories or thought.
Now, having brought awareness into the entire body, bringing to mind some pain or suffering, attempting to pick something small, not your biggest, most pertinent suffering. Noticing the temptation to go there anyways, even when I say not to. Picking something relatively easy and small. Still difficult though. As you bring it to mind, noticing objectively the story the mind is telling, who's at fault, when it started, how it happened, how you could fix it. Seeing if you can observe it. As if you were holding a flashlight in the dark and able to light up different parts of the story. And beneath this story, this cloud of suffering, this blanket of suffering, underneath it, peering underneath it, there's a pain. One word. Despair. Frustration. Betrayal. Fear. Name it. Next, now that you've identified, felt, made contact with this pain, sending caring phrases to this pain. I care about you. Or I love you. I have always loved you. And I will always love you. Picking whatever phrases feel most resonant, potent. I love you. I have always loved you. I will always love you. To that pain. You can utilize visuals such as perhaps a younger version of yourself holding this pain and you saying the phrases to that younger version. You can imagine giving that version of yourself a hug. Whatever feels caring and natural. Now, having spent some time sending caring phrases to the pain, we move to release. And this isn't saying that there's never anything to do, but there's nothing I can do about it right in this moment. Right now, there is nothing to do. I'm sitting here at Dharma Punks or at home. All there is to do is care about the pain and release. There's nothing to be fixed. There's nothing wrong with being in pain. Release and letting go. Anytime the mind pipes up, but I can't, or I don't want to, you can kindly, gently respond, just for now, just for right this moment. And finally, reflecting ease. Noticing any difference in the body and the emotional state from the start to the end. Hopefully at this point, ease. If ease is the case, taking a moment to relax, appreciate the lack of suffering. If things still feel very similarly, that's okay too. Circle back. Circle back to aware. What was missing? And if there's an absence of suffering just for this moment, appreciating that, allowing for that. Notice how quickly the mind just wants to move on to the next thing. Which begs the question, does the mind really want to be at ease? As we come to the end of this meditation, attempting to hold on to this sensation, not throwing the meditation away as soon as the bell rings, taking the mindfulness with you. Welcome back, everybody. Reflecting on compassion and my own personal journey and relationship with it. As I mentioned earlier, this was one that I felt in the beginning was very easy. Initially, when presented with the Brahma Viharas, I felt like, yeah, I'm already a pro at compassion. And come to find out, I was very unskilled with compassion. But taking note of that desire to care as important, even if used incorrectly, if unskillful. So many of my inspirations for so long growing up, I've always desired change in the world. And initially that looked like politically revolutionary, anarchist, movements and punk and then just continuing to find, somewhat in those spaces that there wasn't a lot of happiness in them, or ease, or contentment. And that wasn't to knock or have any judgment against the movements themselves, but knowing that there was space for actual freedom and wanting to know what that was. And then coming across different Buddhist teachings and hearing these wild stories of, a Buddhist being imprisoned and his, after being released, they said, well, weren't you afraid? And them responding, I was afraid that I was going to lose compassion for my captors. And, the other examples of the simile of the saw, where, even when a bandit is coming and sawing off every limb, that even then your mind remains unshakable and does not give rise to hatred. Like that kind of shit, until the Mahayana, until all beings are free from suffering. I won't liberate myself until all the other beings get there first, even every single blade of grass. Like that shit, and knowing that some of that is kind of lofty, being realistic, but being inspired by that kind of freedom, that no matter what the fuck is happening in the world, that there is potential for this kind of state. And so much of that, I wanted to involve others, to bring others, as many people as possible, really, and I've found through the practice that sutta of the bamboo dancer is named Frying Pan, by the way, which is just why, I don't know. Why? I don't know. But the Frying Pan's amazing insight is a fun sentence. Of until I liberate myself, there's not a lot of space for me to be helpful for others. And I feel as though that when I started this was, it was like I wanted the revolution, where we pull the ripcord and everything, explodes, and then those of us that are cool survive. And the longer that I have practiced, there's still definitely some desire for accountability for those who cause harm. But more and more and more as I come to understand what suffering, as we come to understand what suffering really is, the more and more we realize that there's no one we're able to take with us through this. We can, have some hope that through our own actions, through our own healing, that will ripple and cause positive effects. And I know that's true. And I've seen that in my own life, that I've seen those ripples, and, I would know that I've helped a lot of people. But I also know that I can't help everybody. And if that was true, everybody would act the way that I want them to. And that doesn't happen. And the Buddha's teachings, when you study the suttas, you see this time and time again.
the Buddha doesn't go out trying to really convince people of anything. What often you'll see is he'll tell somebody something 3 times, and if they don't listen, he's like, okay. Fine. And so many of the suttas are like that, right? He doesn't waste his time and his energy. He has that discernment to be able to say, I can't, there's nothing here I can do. And when we're talking about wise compassion, it needs that level of discernment. Otherwise, yes, we are susceptible to these things like compassion fatigue, where we're just constantly trying to help others through their stuff and, not succeeding. That's exhausting. For me, that's always the tell. If I'm engaged in service and I start to get a resentment, that's not a them problem. How many times has that happened where you've been, doing something at work or, engaged in some sort of volunteering or whatever, and you start getting resentful of like, fuck this, they always, they. And then, but really what it is like, I have to look back at myself and say, oh, something's out of alignment here. If I'm starting to get resentful at somebody, if I'm starting to, think judgmentally here, I need a shift. Whether that's setting boundaries with somebody, whether that's limiting access, whether that's delegating the task altogether. I feel like resentment and anger are always my flag of, ooh, my compassion is out of alignment. I'm trying to be too people-pleasing now. Trying to do too much. So letting resentment and anger in these situations be a cue for us that to dig a little deeper underneath. The other aspect of compassion that is really important, as named in the meditation, is the letting go. It's a big understanding in the nature of karma and the nature of suffering itself, right? The more we understand the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering, that there's a way out of it, and that often the cause of suffering is craving, the more we understand that, the easier and easier it is to let go. The more we understand karma, the easier and easier it is to let go. If I'm having a hard time letting go, it means I'm probably not totally clear in one of these areas. That other people have their own timeline that has nothing to do with me. I think me personally, that has been one of the biggest gifts my own teacher has done for me. He's taught me a lot over the years. But one of the things that has continued to come up is he never fails to remind me of my karma. And even if the karma is a decade old, that's one that I think really helped liberate me from and start developing some compassion toward a difficult relationship in my life, was his point that, well, you picked it. You picked that person. And, my excuses of well, that's not fair. I was 20 and I didn't mean to pick that person. And and it's but it's true. I did that. And, like, yeah, that can have some, like, cross, you want to be careful with that line into, like, not being, like, victim blamey. But in my own direct experience, the more that I have allowed for my own accountability, my own side of the street, the way easier it is to let go. To know where my karma is and what my part was, rather than, yeah, that person's an asshole, and if they just wouldn't have acted that way, and if they just wouldn't have done this and that, once I bring myself into it and my part, it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, yeah. And so the acronym that I use for compassion, the aware, care, release, ease, being the formula for compassion. Aware, it takes wisdom, right? Being able to get out of the story and directly into the pain itself. Recognizing on some level that the story is the story, and that it doesn't matter all that much, that what matters is what's underneath, and what matters is the pain. That we can do all of the negotiating in the world up in the story, and that doesn't typically get us anywhere, often creating more anxiety, more fear, more trouble. And so training ourselves to bring it down to that one word. What is it? What is the one word that seems to ring the bell in the body that says, oh yeah, that's it, fear. That's what it is. And then doing the only thing that we can do. Care about it. It's what comes up as I'm talking about the care is that I'm sure so many of you have heard it, that quote the Buddhist says, where you can search the whole world over and you can never find anybody more deserving of your care or your love than yourself. And there's always that, I always think, and I always think of Noah, my teacher, when he says, anytime the mind, this is something he says all the time in his talks, he says, anytime the mind says, you're an asshole, you're worthless, you're not good enough, you don't deserve it, you're not worthy, that's not true. And for me, I try to, so much of this practice, we want to stay in the gray. We want to leave room for gray. But sometimes that black and white statement of like, anytime, 100% of the time, the mind says anything of that, it's not true. And so often, in my work that I do with people over and over and over again, when I ask them the question, interesting that there's a lack of worthiness that here or whatever, whose voice is that? There's almost always an answer that we can be like, oh, actually, if I bring my awareness really close and listen, that actually does sound like mom, It sounds like us when we're not really paying that close attention. And so this is, again, where the wisdom is so important when it comes to compassion, because the clearer we can see some of these some of these things, the easier it is to care and the easier it is to let go. The whole of this path is knowing that there's suffering and letting go. Like if there was, that would be it. And much like a tattoo, right? It's not like one fucking big ass letting go. It's a moment of letting go over and over and over and over and over until you have an entire picture that looks like, wow, I've finally, for the most part, let go of this situation. And I don't know what else to say other than it fucking works. So, best of luck. Any thoughts or questions on this topic? Compassion. Saw that sound bite in my head. More passion, more passion. Okay. Cool. Then let's talk about Donna. $5 to $10 suggested donation. If you have less, give less. If you have more, give more. Buddhist teachings are freely offered, so if you don't got it, that's okay. No pressure. Anything that you have to give helps us pay rent and carry on with various tasks. So, with that, we will go ahead and dedicate the merit. May any goodness that came from practice here today not be held but given, above and below, to the seen and the unseen, to those being born and to those who are dying.